taking a look inside of the 4th edition of Heritage Studies 5. We will take a look inside of the Heritage Studies 5 Teacher Edition, the student textbook, and also the student activity manual and the activity manual answer key. So join me as we look inside of these books. This is the Heritage Studies 5 Teacher Edition book. Heritage Studies 5 is a full year course with 180 lessons. This book is split into 20 chapters. And at the beginning of your teacher edition, you're going to find a lot of information that would be really great to read through before you begin teaching this course. We're going to talk a little bit about it as we look through example lessons in a few moments. This is the lesson plan overview. There is a page for the lesson plan overview for every single chapter in this book. So since there are 20 chapters, there will be 20 pages of these lesson plan overviews. This is where I like to go when I'm planning for a lesson or planning for my week of lessons. And today we're going to talk a little bit about chapter 4. So that's called American Independence, and I'm going to explain this to you for chapter 4. This first column tells me my lesson number, and then the next column tells me which pages I will be on in my teacher's edition. And then the next column is which pages I'm assigning out of my student textbook, and then which pages I'm assigning out of my student's activity manual. I then have a brief description of the objectives for each of those lessons, and I can see at the end of the chapter I have a chapter review and a chapter test. So again, we have one of these pages for every single chapter in this book. I'm going to flip ahead now to chapter 4, which is what we're going to be looking at today. Each chapter does start with a brief introduction and a focus of what this chapter will be about. We also have a brief chapter overview at the front of each chapter. This is similar to those lesson plan overviews, but it also gives us the key words or the key phrases that we're going to be talking about in this chapter, and then any of our new vocabulary words. You may notice that the student textbook is embedded into our teacher edition book. I see that this chapter is going to give me some suggestions for Journey Forth books. These suggestions for books are optional. The Journey Forth books might be related to this chapter by theme, character value, or maybe the time period, but these are great additional resources to pull in some extra reading that ties into our chapter 4 concepts. I'm now going to look at lesson number 28, which also tells me lesson 28 at the top corner of this page. I see that I am assigning these pages for my student textbook and my student activity manual. I also have my lesson focus and my objectives and a list of items I might need from the Teacher Toolkit CD. That Teacher Toolkit CD is attached to the back cover of this Teacher Edition book. I also have a material list. So to start out my lesson, I would be going through this introduction and preparation for reading section with my child. We would have a brief conversation about what we were about to read about in our student textbook and just get them thinking about this time period and some of the things they might be seeing in their textbook. Then I would assign them to do their reading. After they were done with their reading, I would begin this Teach for Understanding section. The Teach for Understanding section would continue for several more pages because they had quite a few pages to read in their textbook. And this Teach for Understanding section would guide my questions to make sure that they understood the ideas and the main concepts that they were talking about in their student textbook. I see that I've reached the end of the lesson right here because it says Activity Manual. So this would be the end of my lesson number 28. You may also notice that there's some information given at the bottom of your TE. This is usually background information or activities. That background information will be great to read through before you begin teaching the lesson because you can incorporate it into your discussion as you're doing the Teach for Understanding. The activities are optional, but they're great enrichment activities. They're always related to what we're reading about, and it's a great way to get a hands-on activity and get involved in what you're studying about in the chapter. So now I'm going to flip to the back of this book to the appendix. There are a few things in the back of the book, like the Explaining the Gospel section, a student text index, and the Teacher's Edition index. And then we also in the back have that Teacher Toolkit CD. On this Teacher Toolkit CD, which is attached to this back cover, is the Activity Manual Answer Key, background information, instructional aids, the Instructional Aids Answer Key, interactive visuals, and visuals. So if you needed a picture that was being referenced within your lesson, those visuals will be on this CD. There are also some quizzes and the quiz answer key, and a materials list and rubrics. Sometimes you'll have an activity that is actually built into your student textbook, and you would need to grade that activity using a rubric. Those rubrics would be on this CD as well. So this is the Heritage Studies 5 Teacher Edition book. This is the Heritage Studies 5 student textbook. So the front cover is smaller than a sheet of paper. The book is about an inch thick. I'm going to go ahead and flip to chapter 4, which is what we were looking at in the Teacher Edition book, so we can see how it looks in their student book. So again, each chapter does start with that timeline, so we can reference back to the time period that we're looking at as we add events in our chapter. This book is full of pictures and maps. You may also notice quite a few bolded words. Those are our vocabulary words. Those are also highlighting the people's names and the main events that we are studying. We also see those little questions that are mixed in to make sure we understand the main concepts as we are reading. Sometimes the book likes to highlight specific people, and it will give us some information about their occupation or who they were and when they were alive and what they did. This is an activity that is built into the student textbook. So these are the activities we don't want to skip. In this chapter, they're asking us to make a timeline. So we would be adding a lot of events and dates from things that we have just studied about in this chapter into our timeline. And that ends our chapter. I'm going to flip to the back now to our resource treasury. The resource treasury has several different things in it, including some maps of both the world and some maps of the U.S. We also have a gazetteer, which is a geographical index of important places that are found in this book. And then each entry has a description of those places as well. And we have a biographical dictionary. And then at the end, we have a glossary to define some of our keywords in this book. So this is the student textbook for Heritage Studies 5. This next book we're going to look through is the Heritage Studies 5 Activity Manual. So this is the book that students would be writing in. We've been looking at Chapter 4, so I have opened up to Chapter 4 in this book so we can see the related pages. Each chapter does start with a looking ahead page that talks about terms, places, people, and main concepts in the chapter. And then it gets started into different types of activities to help reinforce the information that your student is reading about in their textbook. We do have study guides built into these chapters. This particular page has us using the biographical dictionary, the gazetteer, and the glossary in the back of our student textbook to define these different words. I also want to point out that at the bottom of these pages, we actually have a lesson number and page numbers and what type of activity these are. So if your child can't find an answer or doesn't remember where they saw it in their textbook, they can look at these page numbers and then go look it up in their student textbook. This is a great study skill to be building with your children. Here's another study guide. So this is another review page. And then we've got a map skill page. And then this will begin our chapter 5 because it is our chapter 5 looking ahead page. So this is a little bit of the student's activity manual. To go along with the student activity manual is the student activity manual answer key. There is no instruction in this book. This is purely the answers to their activity manual. So it's going to look exactly like the student book, except there will be answers or example answers written into the blanks for you. This will provide a quick way for you to grade their work to make sure they're getting the main ideas and understanding the concepts that they're studying about. So this is the activity manual answer key. The last thing I'm going to show you today is called Timeline Snapshots. This is not something that comes with your parent-led textbook kit. It is an add-on. It does coordinate with your Heritage Studies 2 through Heritage Studies 5, so you can reuse it each year as you are doing your lessons in school. All of the pieces are printed on cardstock, so it will also last a while. We really enjoy getting to use these timeline snapshots in our lessons because we can see when events and presidents line up in history. So let me show you how this kit would come. The first thing you would find is your timeline pieces. Now you would have to cut these apart and then you would be able to line them up on your wall and put them together in order. You will also get many different events that you would be able to cut apart as needed, and then you could add those to your timeline. The last event on this card is President Obama's inauguration. You would also be getting a card that has all of the presidents up through President Obama, and it will show you their terms in office. This card also does come with a key to show you which political party each president was with. And what I would do is just cut apart the entire strip, and then I would be able to line that up on my timeline. So let me show you how these pieces would line up. Maybe in school we've been talking about the Boston Tea Party. So we would cut out the Boston Tea Party square, and we would add it to our timeline. Maybe we have also started talking about signing the Declaration of Independence. So I could cut that out and add it to our timeline. And then we might talk about the signing of the Constitution. I could also add that to my timeline. At some point, we do end up with enough pieces on our timeline that we might need to stack on top of each other. So I would also be talking about my Bill of Rights, maybe. I could add that to my timeline up there. So I would be able to line up all of my events using these arrows to point to the spot on the timeline. I also have those president cards. Those go at the bottom of the timeline. I would easily be able to see how long a president was in office. And then remember, those colors represent different political parties. So this is the timeline snapshots. Again, this coordinates with your Heritage Studies 2 through 5. It is all printed on cardstock. You could reuse it each year. You could even leave it up and just add events as you go through those new events in your Heritage Studies lessons, or you could take everything down and start afresh every year. So this is Timeline Snapshots. Thanks for joining me today as we looked inside of the Heritage Studies 5 books. The only thing I didn't show you today that does come in the textbook kit is a test packet and the test answer key packet. Inside of the test packet, you will find one test for every chapter in Heritage Studies 5. You can use these after you complete the chapters with your child. If you have any questions about anything you saw today in Heritage Studies 5, please feel free to reach out to your local Homeworks by Precept consultant. We would love to answer any of the questions that you may have. I hope that you have a great day.